October 1941. Moscow trembles under the weight of German bombs. The city's skyline burns orange against the autumn sky, and the acrid smell of cordite mixes with the bitter cold of the approaching Russian winter. In a cramped recruiting office on the outskirts of the capital, 23-year-old Nadezhda Popova stands among hundreds of young women, her hands trembling not from fear, but from anticipation. The daughter of a railway worker from Donetsk, Nadezhda had learned to fly at 16, joining one of the air clubs that dotted the Soviet Union in the 1930s. She remembers the freedom of those early flights, the wind against her face, the earth falling away beneath her, the pure joy of defiance against gravity itself. But now, as Hitler's armies push deeper into Soviet territory, that freedom has transformed into something darker, more urgent. Major Marina Raskova, the famous aviatrix known as the Soviet Amelia Earhart, has issued a call that echoes through every corner of the nation. Women can fight, not as nurses or factory workers, but as pilots, combat pilots. The room smells of damp wool coats and nervous sweat. Nadezhda watches as Raskova moves through the crowd, her uniform crisp despite the chaos outside. The major's eyes are sharp, assessing. She stops in front of Nadezhda, studies her worn flying log, notes the hours accumulated in rickety trainers over Ukrainian fields. "Can you fly at night?" Raskova asks. The question hangs in the air. Night flying is dangerous even in peacetime. Navigation by stars and instinct, landing strips invisible except for a few kerosene lamps. In war, it becomes something else entirely. German fighters own the daylight skies. Their Messerschmitts tear through Soviet formations like wolves through sheep. But night belongs to those brave enough or desperate enough to claim it. Nadezhda thinks of her brother, killed at the front 3 weeks earlier. She thinks of the children she saw evacuated from Moscow, their faces blank with trauma. She thinks of the burning villages visible from her last civilian flight before all private aviation was grounded. "Yes," she says, "I can fly at night." Raskova nods, makes a mark in her ledger. Around them, other women receive similar questions, give similar answers. By the end of the day, enough volunteers have been selected to form 3 regiments: fighters, dive bombers, and night bombers. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment will be composed entirely of women. No men, no exceptions. Pilots, navigators, mechanics, armorers, every role filled by women who have decided that survival is not enough. They must fight back. That night, Nadezhda lies awake in the temporary barracks, listening to the distant thunder of artillery. She knows what she has volunteered for. She knows the statistics. The average life expectancy of a Soviet pilot at the front is measured in weeks, not months. But statistics mean nothing when your homeland burns. Sleep finally comes, but it brings no rest. In her dreams, she is already flying through darkness, hunting for the lights of German convoys, the heavy drone of engines drowning out all other sound. Engels, Volga region, November 1941. The training base sprawls across frozen fields 200 miles southeast of Moscow. Here, away from the immediate front lines, the newly formed 588th Night Bomber Regiment begins its transformation from civilians into warriors. Nadezhda Popova stands before her assigned aircraft and feels her heart sink. The Polikarpov P-2 is a relic from another era, a wooden canvas biplane designed in 1928 as a crop duster and trainer. Its maximum speed barely exceeds 90 miles per hour. It has no radio, no guns except for a single rear-mounted machine gun that frequently jams in the cold, no armor plating, no enclosure to protect pilots from the freezing wind. The smell of dope, the chemical used to tighten the canvas, makes her eyes water. She runs her hand along the lower wing, feeling the fabric give slightly under her touch. This is not a weapon. This is kindling with wings. They're sending us to war in crop dusters, her navigator Katya Ryabova mutters. Katya is 19, a geography student from Leningrad who navigates by reading maps with a flashlight, trying not to blind her pilot in the process. The 2 women have been paired together based on weight and compatibility. The P-2 is so light that crew assignments must account for every kilogram. Their commander, Major Yevdokia Bershanskia, gathers the regiment in the freezing hangar. She is 28, a veteran pilot with a reputation for precision and discipline. The Germans have radar. She begins, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. They have radio direction finders. They have everything we don't have. So, we will use what they cannot have, silence. She explains the tactic that will define them. The P2's maximum payload is only 200 kilograms of bombs, 6 small munitions that must be armed by hand, loaded into crude racks beneath the wings. But the aircraft's slow speed and wood canvas construction make it nearly invisible to radar. Its engine at low throttle produces little noise. The plan is audacious. Fly close to the target, cut the engine, glide in silently, drop the bombs, restart the engine, escape in the confusion. Simple in theory. Suicidal in practice. Training begins before dawn. Nadezhda learns to navigate by the stars, to estimate altitude by the feel of the wind, to identify landmarks from 1,000 feet up in total darkness. She learns to fly with the engine off, gliding on winter thermals, judging her descent rate by instinct. The P2 handles like a barn door in a hurricane, requiring constant corrections, but it is also nearly impossible to stall. She learns to arm bombs while wearing heavy gloves, to load them onto the racks in darkness, to pull the release lever at precisely the right moment. Mistakes in training are common. Irina Sabrova accidentally drops a dummy bomb on the runway, creating a crater that takes 2 days to fill. Nadia Tikhonova mistimes her glide approach and crashes into a snowbank, destroying her landing gear, but walking away uninjured. Each mistake is a lesson purchased in bruises and humiliation rather than blood. But the learning curve is steep and time is short. By December, the regiment is declared operational. They receive their orders. Deploy to the southern front, where German armies are pushing toward the Caucasus oil fields. Before they leave, Bershanskia gathers them one final time. The Germans will call us many things, she says. Show them what Russian women can do. That night, as they pack their few belongings, Nadezhda writes a letter to her mother. She does not mention the aircraft's flaws or her own fears. She writes only of duty and honor and the promise of victory. She does not mention that she has not been issued a parachute at the altitudes they will fly. Parachutes are useless weight. Southern Front, near Rostov-on-Don, December 1941. The temperature drops to 20 below zero. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment arrives at their forward airfield, a snow-covered field marked only by a few tents, a fuel truck, and a hand-painted sign that reads, Home of the Night Witches. The name is not yet theirs. They have not yet earned it. Nadezhda's first combat mission is scheduled for 11 p.m. The target, a German ammunition depot 15 miles behind enemy lines, identified by reconnaissance that afternoon. She and Katia performed their pre-flight check by flashlight. Oil thick as molasses. Control surfaces stiff with ice. Canvas wings covered in frost. They scrape ice from the wings with their gloved hands, their breath forming clouds in the darkness. The bombs, 6 crude cylinders weighing 32 kilograms each, are loaded and armed. Each one carries a simple contact fuse. There is no sophistication here, no precision guidance. Just high explosive and hope. At 2,300 hours, Nadezhda starts the engine. The 5-cylinder radial coughs, sputters, catches. The smell of castor oil exhaust fills the cockpit. The P2's engine uses castor oil for lubrication, and the fumes are nauseating. She has learned to ignore it. Takeoff is routine. The P2 lifts off after barely 100 meters, climbing slowly into the winter night. The stars are brilliant, undimmed by blackout or smoke. Katia navigates by following a frozen river, then a railway line, then a road marked on her map. At 5,000 feet, they can see the entire front. Fires burning, artillery flashes like distant lightning, searchlights sweeping the sky. 15 minutes into the flight, they cross the front line. Tracer fire arcs up from German positions, lazy red streaks that seem to float rather than fly. The fire is not aimed at them. The Germans have not yet detected their approach. Nadezhda feels her heart hammering against her ribs. 5 miles from target, Katya taps her shoulder, points ahead. A cluster of lights, trucks, probably, or generators powering the depot. Nadezhda reduces throttle, lets the engine idle. The noise drops to a whisper. They begin their glide. The wind screams through the wing struts, a high-pitched whistle that will later earn them their German nickname. The P-2 descends at a shallow angle, losing altitude slowly. The lights grow closer. She can see details now. Rows of supply trucks, stacked crates, guards walking between tents. 4,000 feet. 3,000. Still undetected. The cold is intense, burning exposed skin despite her leather helmet and goggles. Her hands are numb on the control stick. 2,000 feet. The depot fills her vision. She can hear voices now, German voices shouting orders, the clank of metal on metal. She levels off at 1,500 feet, holds the aircraft steady despite the buffeting wind. Ready, Katya whispers. Nadezhda pulls the bomb release lever. 6 times in rapid succession. The aircraft lurches upward as 400 kilograms of weight falls away. She shoves the throttle forward, restarts the engine at full power. Below, the first explosion lights up the night. Then the second. The third touches off a secondary blast, ammunition cooking off in a chain reaction of fire and thunder. The entire depot erupts. She banks hard left, away from the inferno, as searchlights suddenly stab upward, sweeping for targets. Tracer fire follows, streams of red and green cutting through the darkness. But she is already gone, climbing back toward Soviet lines, the P-2's slow speed now an advantage in the darkness. They land 40 minutes later, the aircraft untouched. Nadezhda's hands shake so badly she can barely unbuckle her harness. Brushanskaya is waiting by the aircraft. Good work, she says simply, refuel and rearm. You fly again in 2 hours. And so it begins. That night, Nadezhda flies 5 more missions. By dawn, she has dropped 36 bombs and earned her first mention in the regimental log. The Germans, meanwhile, have begun to notice the strange aircraft that hunt them in darkness, the eerie whistle of wind through struts, the silence before the bombs fall. They will soon give the 588th a name that history will remember. Spring 1942, Southern Front. The snow melts into mud, transforming the airfield into a quagmire. The 588th has been flying combat missions for 4 months now, averaging 15 sorties per night per crew. Nadezhda Popova has flown over 300 missions. She has stopped counting. The tally becomes meaningless when each night blurs into the next. Take off, navigate, glide, bomb, escape, land, refuel, repeat. Her hands bear permanent calluses from gripping the control stick. Her face is lined with exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. But the regiment is earning a reputation. German soldiers along the Southern Front have begun reporting strange occurrences, silent aircraft that appear from nowhere, dropping bombs with uncanny accuracy before vanishing into the night. The sound is distinctive, a whooshing, whistling noise, like wind through a broom or the swish of a witch's skirt in flight. One captured German diary, recovered from a battlefield near Mozdok, contains an entry dated April 18, 1942. We are being hunted by Nacthexen night witches. They are devils in canvas aircraft. Our flak cannot hit them. Our searchlights cannot find them. Sleep is impossible. Every night they come again and again until we are mad from the noise and the explosions. The name spreads. Night witches. Nacthexen. The German propaganda machine tries to use it as a fear tactic, warning troops about Soviet desperation. Sending women to fight proves how weak the Red Army has become. But the tactic backfires. The name becomes a badge of honor. When news of the German nickname reaches the 588th, the women paint it on their aircraft. Brushanskaya, ever practical, uses it to boost morale. If they fear us, we have already won half the battle, she tells her pilots. But fear cuts both ways. In May, the regiment suffers its first casualties. Larissa Litvinova and her navigator Vera Balik are caught in searchlights during a bombing run near Krasnodar. German 37mm flak guns open fire. The P-2, with its canvas skin and exposed crew, offers no protection. Both women die instantly. The aircraft spirals into the ground, exploding on impact. Nadezhda attends the memorial service in silence. There are no bodies to bury. Nothing survived the crash and subsequent fire. They plant 2 wooden crosses in the frozen ground and promise revenge. That night, she flies 8 missions. On the 4th, her aircraft takes fire. A single 20mm round punches through her lower wing, missing the fuel tank by inches. She completes the mission anyway, landing with a hole large enough to put her fist through. The mechanics patch it with fabric and glue. By dawn, it is flying again. The losses continue. Paulina Gelman's navigator is wounded by shrapnel, but they complete their mission before returning for medical treatment. Yevgenia Kritova's engine is hit. She crash lands in no man's land and walks back to Soviet lines, arriving at dawn covered in mud and blood from minor cuts. Every mission is a gamble. The P-2's maximum altitude is barely above the effective range of German light anti-aircraft guns. The aircraft's slow speed means extended exposure to ground fire. And still they fly because every bomb dropped on a German convoy or supply depot is one less shell fired at Soviet soldiers, one less bullet aimed at Soviet citizens. By summer 1942, the Night Witches have dropped over 3,000 bombs. German units request transfers away from sectors where the 588th operates. Soviet ground commanders request the Night Witches by name for close air support. The women of the 588th have become legends, but legends, Nadezhda learns, die just as easily as anyone else. She keeps a photograph of Litvinova in her flight jacket, a reminder that every takeoff might be the last. She writes fewer letters home. There is nothing left to say that has not already been said. The war grinds on. The Night Witches fly on. And in the darkness, the whistle of wind through canvas wings becomes the sound the Germans fear most. August 1942, North Caucasus. The Germans launch Operation Edelweiss, driving toward the oil fields of Grozny and Baku. The 588th is redeployed to support Soviet defenses around Mozdok, a critical railway junction. The tempo of operations intensifies. Where previous months saw 10 to 12 sorties per night, command now demands 18, 20, sometimes more. The aircraft and crews are pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Nadezhda has been flying for 9 months without leave. Her weight has dropped from 62 kilograms to 51. She survives on black bread, weak tea, and adrenaline. Her hands tremble constantly, even when not flying. She has developed a persistent cough from breathing castor oil fumes in the open cockpit. The regiment doctor orders rest. She ignores it. August 31st, 1942. The date is burned into Nadezhda's memory. Intelligence reports a German armored column, panzers, troop carriers, supply trucks, massing for an assault on Soviet positions at dawn. The 588th is ordered to disrupt the column throughout the night, preventing the Germans from organizing their attack. Nadezhda's first mission launches at 2,200 hours. The target is visible from 10 miles away, headlights and campfires where German troops prepare for battle. She glides in silently, drops her bombs on a cluster of vehicles, pulls away as explosions light up the night. Flak opens up, immediately heavier than usual. The Germans are learning, concentrating their anti-aircraft guns to create killing zones. Tracer fire brackets her aircraft. A round punches through her rudder. She lands at 22:45, already exhausted. The ground crew swarms the P-2, patching the damage, refueling, rearming. 20 minutes later, she is airborne again. Mission 2 targets the same column, now moving to avoid further air attack. She finds them by following the dust cloud visible in the moonlight. Bombs away. More flak. A searchlight catches her, blinding. She dives below the beam, trades altitude for speed, escapes. Mission 3 at 0100 hours. The column has split up, dispersing to minimize damage. She hunts individual trucks, dropping bombs one at a time. Less efficient, but the harassment is working. The German advance has stalled. Mission 4 at 0230. Mission 5 at 0415. Each time, the landing becomes harder. Her vision blurs. Her reaction time slows. Katia has to shake her awake during the approach to their sixth target. Stay with me, Katia pleads. Just a few more hours. Mission 6 at 0545. Dawn is breaking. The P-2, nearly invisible at night, becomes vulnerable in daylight. German fighters patrol at first light, hunting for Soviet aircraft. She completes the bomb run as the sun rises, then dives for the deck, flying at treetop level to avoid detection. Mission 7 at 0715. Daylight operations are not standard procedure, but the German column is still moving, and every delay helps Soviet defenders prepare. She flies alone. Most crews have reached their limits. Anti-aircraft fire is more accurate in daylight. A round explodes near her wing, shrapnel tearing through canvas. The aircraft shudders but holds together. She drops her bombs on a fuel truck, watches it explode in a pillar of black smoke. Mission 8 at 0840 hours. She has been awake for 26 hours straight. Her vision narrows to a tunnel. Her hands move by muscle memory. The German column has finally stopped, scattered, and broken by the night's harassment. She drops her last bombs on a command post identifiable by its radio antennas, then turns for home. The flight back is a blur. She remembers landing only because Katia describes it later, a barely controlled crash onto the grass strip, the P-2 bouncing twice before settling. Nadezhda collapses in the cockpit, unconscious before the engine stops. She wakes 12 hours later in the medical tent. Bershanskaya is sitting beside her cot. 8 missions, the commander says quietly. A regiment record. The German attack was delayed 6 hours. Our ground forces held. You save lives. Nadezhda closes her eyes. She feels no pride, no satisfaction, only exhaustion and the knowledge that tomorrow night she will fly again. Stalingrad, October 1942. The city burns, street by street. Building by building, the Soviet 62nd Army clings to the western bank of the Volga, while German forces pour artillery and bombs into the rubble. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment operates from an airfield 20 miles east of the river, flying missions to support defenders trapped in the city. The missions are among the most dangerous yet. Stalingrad's sky is crowded with aircraft, Soviet fighters, German bombers, reconnaissance planes, and the constant swarm of anti-aircraft fire from both sides. The night witches must navigate through this chaos in unarmed wooden biplanes, bombing German positions that are sometimes only hundreds of meters from Soviet lines. Nadezhda has lost count of her missions. 500? 600? The numbers blend together. What she remembers instead are the faces, the women who flew beside her and did not return. In September, Irina Kosharina and her navigator are shot down over the tractor factory district. No parachutes, no survivors. In early October, Olga Sanfarova's aircraft takes a direct hit from anti-aircraft fire. The P-2 explodes in midair, pieces of burning canvas fluttering down like terrible confetti. The regiment holds a brief memorial. There is no time for more. By October 15th, the 588th has lost 9 aircraft and 18 women. But they have also flown more than 10,000 combat sorties, dropped 7,000 tons of bombs, and destroyed or damaged dozens of German positions, vehicles, and supply depots. The exchange rate is brutal but effective. Soviet commanders consider the night witches invaluable. German soldiers consider them a nightmare made real. On October 23rd, Nadezhda flies a mission that will stay with her for the rest of her life. The target is a German artillery position on Mamayev Kurgan, the hill that dominates Stalingrad center. Soviet forces have lost and recaptured the hill 17 times in 6 weeks. Tonight, the Germans hold it, and their guns are tearing apart Soviet positions below. She approaches at midnight, cutting her engine at 3,000 feet. The city below is a vision of hell. Fires everywhere, tracers crisscrossing the sky, explosions rippling through the ruins. She can smell the smoke, even at altitude, can hear the distant rumble of artillery. The target is marked by Soviet forces using colored flares, green smoke rising from Soviet positions, red from the German-held hill. She lines up her approach, focusing on the red. 2,000 feet. Searchlights stab upward, but they are Soviet searchlights silhouetting German positions for her benefit. The risk is calculated. If she is caught in the beams, German gunners will have an easy target, but the lights also show her exactly where to aim. 1,000 feet. She can see individual gun positions, sandbagged emplacements, tiny figures moving among the artillery pieces. She drops her bombs in a single string, 6 explosions walking across the hilltop. Secondary blasts follow, ammunition cooking off. She banks away, restarts her engine, climbs back into darkness. But as she turns, she sees something that makes her blood freeze. A Soviet P-2 caught in a searchlight. German tracers converge on the aircraft. She recognizes the tail number. It is her friend Zhenya Kratova, flying her 9th mission of the night. The tracer fire finds its mark. The P-2's fuel tank explodes, a brief orange flower blooming in the darkness. The aircraft spins downward, trailing fire, and crashes into the Volga. No parachute. No chance. Nadezhda completes her flight in silence, lands in silence, walks past the celebrating ground crew in silence. She finds a quiet corner behind the maintenance tent and vomits until there is nothing left. The cost of victory. She has heard the phrase before in speeches and propaganda. Tonight, she understands what it means. Zhenya is dead. Olga is dead. Irina is dead. 18 women dead in 6 weeks, and the war shows no sign of ending. And yet, tomorrow night she will fly again. Because Stalingrad must hold. Because every German shell destroyed is one less shell fired at Soviet soldiers. Because if any of them stop, then her friends died for nothing. At dawn, the regiment gathers for roll call. 18 names are read. 18 names receive no answer. Brzezinski's voice never wavers. They died as heroes, she says. We honor them by continuing the fight. That night, Nadezhda flies 12 missions. Each one is for Zhenya. Each bomb dropped is revenge and remembrance. The Germans will learn what it costs to kill a night witch. They will learn in fire and thunder, delivered by women who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. January 1943, Krasnodar region. The tide is turning. The Germans are retreating from the Caucasus, pushed back by Soviet offensives launched in the wake of Stalingrad's liberation. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment pursues them, flying missions to harass retreating columns, destroy abandoned supply depots, and support advancing Soviet forces. Nadezhda Popova has now flown over 700 combat missions. Her aircraft, tail number 4-23, is held together by patches and prayers. The mechanics joke that more of the plane is repair fabric than original canvas. She has been recommended for the Hero of the Soviet Union 3 times, and 3 times the recommendation has been denied. The official reason is always the same. More documentation needed, more witness testimony required. The unofficial reason, whispered among the pilots, is that the High Command is reluctant to award the USSR's highest honor to women. Heroes are supposed to be men, tank commanders, infantry officers, partisan leaders, not 25-year-old women who fly crop dusters at night. But on February 23, 1943, Red Army Day, everything changes. Stalin himself reviews the combat records of the 588th. The numbers are undeniable: 24,000 combat sorties, 23 tons of bombs dropped, countless German vehicles, artillery positions, and supply depots destroyed, all achieved by women flying obsolete aircraft, often without parachutes, in conditions that would ground most air forces. The decree comes down on March 15th. 23 women of the 588th Night Bomber Regiment are awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union. Nadezhda Popova is among them. The The ceremony takes place at an airfield near Krasnodar. A general she has never met pins the Gold Star medal to her uniform, kisses her on both cheeks, and delivers a speech about courage and dedication. She barely hears it. Her mind is elsewhere, with the women who did not survive to receive their medals. Genya, who died over Stalingrad. Olga, who exploded in midair. Larissa, the regiment's first casualty. The list goes on. 23 women receive medals. 32 women are dead. The mathematics of heroism. That night, there is a celebration, real vodka, procured somehow by the mechanics, and black bread with butter, a luxury that tastes like heaven after months of stale rations. The pilots toast their fallen comrades, sing old folk songs, and pretend for a few hours that the war is far away. But at 2,200 hours, the orders come. German forces are attempting to establish a defensive line along the Kuban River. The 588th is needed. Medals or no medals, heroes or not, there are still missions to fly. Nadezhda straps into her cockpit, the Gold Star medal heavy in her breast pocket. Katia, her navigator, taps her shoulder. Think they'll write about us? Katia asks, after the war, think people will remember? Nadezhda considers the question as she starts the engine. The two coughs to life, the familiar smell of castor oil filling the cockpit. Below, in the darkness, German forces are digging in, preparing defenses, dreaming of holding the line. They do not yet know that the night witches are coming. Maybe, Nadezhda finally answers, but right now we have a job to do. They fly 8 missions that night. Each one is as dangerous as the first mission she flew 15 months ago. The Gold Star does not stop bullets. The metal does not make the aircraft fly faster or the bombs hit harder. It is just metal pinned to fabric, a symbol that means everything and nothing. But when she lands at dawn, exhausted and covered in castor oil soot, she touches the metal in her pocket and allows herself a moment of pride. Not for herself, but for all the women who flew beside her. For all the women who will never fly again. They are heroes. History will remember. And in the meantime, there is still a war to win. Summer 1944, Belarus. The Red Army launches Operation Bagration, a massive offensive that will liberate Belarus and destroy German Army Group Center. The 588th Night Bomber Regiment, now designated the 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment in recognition of their service, advances with the front. They are no longer the inexperienced volunteers who reported to Engels in 1941. They are veterans hardened by 3 years of combat, their tactics refined through trial and error and blood. Nadezhda is now a senior lieutenant, one of the regiment's most experienced pilots. Her mission count exceeds 900. She has been wounded twice, once by shrapnel that grazed her shoulder, once when her aircraft crashed on landing, and she broke 3 ribs. Both times, she returned to flying within weeks. The P-2 has evolved. New models feature better engines, enclosed cockpits for winter operations, and improved bomb racks. Some even carry rockets. RS-82s that turn the ancient biplane into a ground attack platform. But the basic design remains unchanged: wood, canvas, and courage. The summer offensive is unlike anything Nadezhda has experienced. The front moves so quickly that the 588th must relocate their airfield every few days, following Soviet forces as they race westward. What once took months, moving supplies, establishing operations, organizing logistics, now happens in hours. They operate from hastily cleared fields, from captured German airstrips, even from highways when necessary. The missions change too. Early in the war, targets were mostly German defensive positions and supply lines. Now, the targets are retreating columns, abandoned equipment, and desperate rearguard actions. The Germans are running, and the night witches hunt them without mercy. July 15, 1944. Nadezhda's mission is to bomb a bridge over the Berezina River, where German forces are attempting to evacuate heavy equipment before Soviet tanks arrive. The bridge is defended by concentrated anti-aircraft fire. The Germans know how critical it is and have ringed it with flak guns. She approaches at midnight, accompanied by 2 other P2s. The plan is the old tactic: 2 aircraft draw fire while the third attacks. She volunteers to be the decoy. Her aircraft dives toward the bridge, engine roaring at full throttle. Searchlights lock onto her immediately. Tracer fire fills the sky, streams of red and white converging on her position. She jinks left, then right, the P2 responding sluggishly to her inputs. A round punches through her lower wing. Another tears through the fuselage inches from Katia's position. Now she shouts. The third P2, piloted by Irina Sabrova, glides in silently from the opposite direction. 6 bombs fall, bracketing the bridge. The central span collapses into the river in a spectacular cascade of steel and concrete. German vehicles on the far side are trapped. Nadezhda pulls away, climbing hard. The searchlights lose her in the darkness. Her aircraft is riddled with holes. 17 bullet strikes. The mechanics will count later, but still flying. They land to cheers from the ground crew. The bridge destruction has trapped an entire German mechanized battalion. Soviet tanks will overrun them by morning. But the celebration is muted. Everyone knows the war is not yet over. The Germans are retreating, yes, but they fight with the desperation of cornered animals. Every mission is still a roll of dice. Death does not care about momentum or morale. That night, after her 4th mission, Nadezhda sits alone and writes a letter she has been composing in her mind for 3 years. It is addressed to the families of the women who did not survive, Genya, Olga, Larissa, and all the others. She writes about courage and sacrifice. She writes about friendship forged in fire. She writes about a promise made in darkness and kept in blood, that their deaths would not be in vain, that the war would be won, that Russia would be free. She does not mail the letter. Not yet. The war is not over. But someday, when the guns finally fall silent, she will make sure those families know what their daughters, their sisters, their friends accomplished. She will make sure the world remembers the night witches. April 1945, Polish-German border. The 46th Guards Night Bomber Aviation Regiment crosses into Germany itself. For Nadezhda and her fellow pilots, the moment carries profound weight. For years ago, they were defending Moscow, flying obsolete aircraft with minimal training, facing an enemy that seemed invincible. Now, they are part of the force driving toward Berlin, hunting German forces on their own soil. The missions over Germany are different. The anti-aircraft defenses are heavier, more sophisticated, operated by crews defending their homeland with desperate intensity. German fighters, though increasingly rare, due to fuel shortages, are more aggressive when they do appear. And the targets, German cities, German railways, German civilians fleeing westward, create moral complexities that did not exist when bombing enemy forces in Soviet territory. Nadezhda flies her 1000th combat mission on April 18, 1945. The target is a German supply depot near Frankfurt and Der Oder, where Wehrmacht units are gathering for final defense of Berlin. She approaches the target with the same caution she employed on her first mission in December 1941. Experience has taught her that complacency kills. The final weeks of the war claim more night witches. Vera Balik, not the original Vera who died in 1942, but another pilot who joined in 1943, is shot down over Kustrin. She survives the crash, but dies of injuries 2 days later. Galia Dokutovich's aircraft is hit by ground fire. She manages to land in Soviet-controlled territory, but the aircraft is a total loss. The war is ending, but it is not yet over. And then on May 2nd, 1945, Berlin falls. Soviet forces raise the red flag over the Reichstag. News spreads through the regiment like wildfire. The women gather around a radio, listening to the announcement, hearing the official confirmation of what they have fought for since 1941. The war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered. Nadezhda sits in her cockpit, the same P2 she has flown for the past 2 years, tail number 4-23, held together by patches and stubbornness, and tries to process what peace means. No more missions, no more nights spent gliding through flak, no more watching friends die, no more fear, but also no more purpose. for 4 years. Her identity has been defined by the war. She is a night witch, a bomber pilot, a hunter of Germans in the darkness. Who is she when the hunting ends? The regiment is officially disbanded on October 15th, 1945. The women gather one final time at an airfield in Poland. The Patus, those ancient canvas-covered biplanes that carried them through hell, are lined up for decommissioning. Some will be returned to civilian service as crop dusters and trainers. Most will be scrapped. Nadezhda walks down the line, touching each aircraft, remembering. This one flew the mission over Stalingrad where Genya died. That one crash-landed in Belarus and was rebuilt in 3 days. This one still bears the scorch marks from a near miss by a flak shell. Each aircraft is a memorial, a testament to what was endured and what was sacrificed. Bershanskaya, now a major and hero of the Soviet Union, gives a final speech. We were told women could not be combat pilots, she says. We were told our aircraft were obsolete. We were told we would not survive the first month. We proved them all wrong. The night witches flew 24,000 combat sorties. We dropped 23,000 tons of bombs. We served from 1941 to 1945 without a single day of rest. 32 of our sisters did not return. We will remember them, and we will make sure the world remembers what we accomplished. The women embrace, exchange addresses, promise to stay in contact. Many will. Some will not. The bonds forged in war often do not survive peace. Nadezhda returns to her hometown in Donetsk. She tries to resume a normal life, finds work, marries a veteran pilot she knew before the war, starts a family. But the nightmares persist. The sound of wind through canvas, the whistle of bombs falling, the screams of friends dying. Peace is harder than war in its own way. In war, the enemy is clear, the mission defined, the purpose absolute. In peace, she must find new reasons to wake up each morning, new missions to pursue, new purposes to embrace. She becomes a flight instructor, teaching the next generation of Soviet pilots. She speaks at schools about the war, about courage, about what women can accomplish when given the chance. And every year on May 9th, Victory Day, she gathers with the surviving night witches and remembers. They are fewer each year. Time accomplishes what the Germans could not, but their legacy endures. The night witches proved that courage has no gender, that determination can overcome technological disadvantage, that even in humanity's darkest hours, light can be found in the most unlikely places. Moscow, 1950s to 1960s. The war has been over for more than a decade, but for Nadezhda Popova and her fellow night witches, the battle for recognition is just beginning. In Stalin's Soviet Union and later under Khrushchev, the official narrative of the Great Patriotic War focuses on male heroes, tank commanders, infantry officers, partisan leaders, the women who flew combat missions, who died in flaming aircraft, who earned the highest decorations for valor, are quietly pushed to the margins of history. Nadezhda works as a flight instructor in Donetsk, teaching young men, always men, how to fly. She rarely speaks of her wartime service. When she does, the reactions are predictable. Disbelief, condescension, or the polite skepticism reserved for old soldiers whose memories have become unreliable. Women pilots, a young cadet asks during a training session in 1956, "Did that really happen, or is it propaganda?" She looks at him for a long moment, remembering the weight of the stick in her hands, the smell of castor oil and cordite, the faces of friends who never came home. "It happened," she says simply, and moves on to the next lesson. The silence extends beyond Soviet borders. In the West, where the Cold War transforms yesterday's allies into today's enemies, Soviet military achievements are dismissed or minimized. The night witches, when mentioned at all, are treated as curiosities, a propaganda invention perhaps, or an exaggeration of some minor support role. The truth is too extraordinary for a world that cannot imagine women in combat. But some remember. In 1965, a documentary filmmaker named Mikhail Semyonov approaches Nadezhda with a proposal, a film about the 588th Regiment featuring interviews with survivors. She is hesitant. 20 years have passed since the war's end. Many of the night witches are dead, not from combat now, but from illness, accidents, the accumulated toll of wartime stress on bodies pushed beyond endurance. Those who survive are scattered across the Soviet Union, living quiet lives, raising families, trying to forget. But Semyonov is persistent. He tracks down 15 veterans, convincing them to tell their stories on camera. The filming takes place over 6 months, gathering in Moscow. Nadezhda sees women she has not spoken to since 1945. Irina Sabrova, who flew 1,008 missions and earned the Hero of the Soviet Union. Natalia Meklin, who was shot down twice and returned to flying both times. Polina Gelman, whose navigator was wounded mid-mission but completed the bomb run anyway. They gather in a small studio, these middle-aged women who were once young warriors, and remember. The memories come slowly at first, then flood out, stories that have been locked away for decades, trauma never processed, grief never expressed. Irina breaks down recounting the death of her friend Tanya, shot down over the Kuban in 1943. Natalia describes the sound of bullets punching through canvas, the terror of being caught in searchlights. Paulina speaks of the guilt, survivor's guilt, that has haunted her since the war ended. Why did she survive when so many others died? The documentary is completed in 1966, but is not released. Soviet censors object to the tone, which they deem insufficiently optimistic. The focus on trauma and loss does not fit the official narrative of glorious victory. The film sits in archives for 15 years, but the act of remembering, of speaking truth to one another, changes something for the survivors. They begin meeting regularly, forming a veterans association specifically for the women of the 588th. They track down families of the fallen, sharing stories that parents and siblings never heard. They lobby quietly, carefully, for proper recognition of their service. Progress is slow. Official histories continue to minimize or ignore their contributions. But the women persist because they made a promise long ago that the 32 who died would be remembered, that their sacrifice would not be erased. In 1981, the documentary finally airs on Soviet television, edited heavily, but still powerful. A new generation discovers the night witches. Letters pour in from school children, from veterans, from women who never knew that Soviet women flew combat missions. The silence begins to crack. Nadezhda, now in her 60s, finds herself invited to speak at schools, at veteran gatherings, at conferences. The skepticism is still there, but so is genuine curiosity. People want to know, what was it like? Were you afraid? How did you survive? She tells them the truth. Yes, she was afraid. Every single mission. Fear was the constant companion, the whisper in the darkness that said tonight might be the night you don't come home. But fear was not the enemy. Fear was what kept you sharp, what made you careful, what reminded you that life was precious. The enemy was hatred and cruelty, and the willingness to let evil triumph through inaction. They flew because someone had to. They flew because their homeland burned. They flew because the alternative, surrender, defeat, extinction, was unthinkable. And if the world forgot them for 40 years, well, the world has a short memory. But the night witches remember. And now, finally, they are teaching others to remember too. Moscow, 1990s to 2000s. The Soviet Union collapses. Archives open. Secrets are revealed. And among the flood of newly accessible historical records, researchers discover the full scope of what the night witches accomplished. The numbers long classified or minimized are staggering. 23,672 combat sorties, more than 3,000 tons of bombs dropped, 26 aircraft lost to enemy action and accidents, 32 pilots and navigators killed, 23 heroes of the Soviet Union, the most of any female military unit in history. But numbers alone cannot capture the full story. Western historians, freed from Cold War biases, begin serious research. Books are written. Documentaries produced. The night witches transition from forgotten footnote to celebrated legend. Nadezhda Popova, now in her 80s, becomes the face of this rediscovery. She is interviewed by journalists from America, Britain, Germany, nations that once dismissed Soviet women pilots as propaganda. She travels to air shows, to museums, to universities. She watches as her old aircraft, or replicas of them, are displayed with plaques explaining what the 588th accomplished. In 2005, she attends an air show in England where a restored P-2 performs. The sight of that ancient biplane climbing into the sky brings tears to her eyes. The smell of castor oil, the sound of wind through struts, the memories flood back, not just the fear and trauma, but the pride, the camaraderie, the absolute certainty that what they did mattered. A young British pilot approaches after the demonstration. She is 24, a helicopter pilot in the Royal Air Force. "I just wanted to say thank you," the pilot says. "Reading about the night witches is why I joined up. You proved it was possible." Nadezhda looks at this young woman in her crisp uniform, this representative of a new generation that takes women in combat roles for granted, and realizes that the legacy is secure. The night witches did not fly alone. They flew for every woman who would come after, carrying the weight of centuries of doubt and dismissal on their canvas wings. In 2008, Nadezhda returns to Russia for a reunion of surviving night witches. Only 6 remain. They are in their 80s and 90s now, bodies frail but spirits unbowed. They gather at a memorial outside Moscow, where a statue depicts a female pilot standing beside a P-2, gazing skyward. The names of the 32 who died are carved into black granite. They stand before the memorial in silence, these old women who were once young warriors. The wind whispers through nearby trees, and for a moment it sounds like wind through canvas, like the approach of ghosts flying ancient biplanes. Irina Sabrova, the last surviving pilot with over 1,000 missions, speaks. Her voice is thin with age, but firm with conviction. "We did not fly for glory," she says. "We did not fly for recognition. We flew because our country needed us, and we could not say no. That some of us are remembered is a gift. That all of us, living and dead, will be remembered is a responsibility we leave to you." The U is directed at the crowd gathered for the ceremony: school children, veterans, historians, journalists. The responsibility to remember, to tell the story, to ensure that the night witches are not forgotten again. The world is changing. Women serve in combat roles in dozens of nations now. Female fighter pilots, bomber pilots, helicopter pilots. Roles that seemed impossible in 1941 are now routine. The barriers have not all fallen, but they are crumbling, and every breach can be traced back to pioneers like the night witches who proved it was possible. Nadezhda returns home to Donetsk one final time. She is 90 years old, her health failing. She sits in her small apartment, surrounded by photographs and medals, and writes letters to the families of the women who did not return. She has been writing these letters for 60 years, fulfilling the promise she made in darkness over a Belarusian battlefield. Each letter is a small act of remembrance, a refusal to let death be the final word. Her own final letter, written to the Night Witches Veterans Association, is found after her death in 2013. It reads in part, "We were ordinary women thrust into extraordinary circumstances. We did what was necessary, what was possible, what duty demanded. If our story inspires others, men or women, to face their own darkness with courage, then every mission, every loss, every sacrifice was worth it. Remember us not as victims or oddities, but as soldiers who served with honor. Remember that we flew not for ourselves, but for something larger, for freedom, for justice, for the belief that a better world was worth fighting for. And remember that the sky belongs to everyone brave enough to claim it. The sky above the Black Sea, present day. A young woman named Katia Voloshyna sits in the cockpit of a restored P-2 biplane preparing for takeoff. She is a pilot for a historical aviation society that preserves and flies World War II aircraft. Her great-grandmother was Nadezhda Popova, the knight who flew over 1,000 combat missions and lived to tell the tale. Katia never met her great-grandmother, Nadezhda died when Katia was still a child, but she grew up with the stories, the faded photographs, the medals kept in a glass case. And now, at 26, she has learned to fly the same aircraft that carried Nadezhda through 4 years of war. The P-2 is exactly as the veterans described it: slow, underpowered, drafty, uncomfortable. The castor oil smoke makes her nauseous. The open cockpit exposes her to every gust of wind. The controls require constant attention. The aircraft wants to wander, to drift, to do anything except fly straight. And yet, there is something magical about it. This machine, so fragile and obsolete, carried women into battle and brought most of them home. This canvas-covered relic, dismissed as a crop duster, became a weapon that terrified one of the most powerful military forces in history. Katia advances the throttle. The 5-cylinder radial engine coughs, then roars. The P-2 accelerates down the grass strip, slowly, painfully slowly by modern standards, and lifts off. The earth falls away. The Black Sea spreads below, brilliant blue, under the summer sun. She climbs to 3,000 feet, levels off, and for the first time truly understands what her great-grandmother experienced: not the fear that is mercifully absent in peacetime flight, not the exhaustion. One mission in daylight cannot compare to 18 missions in darkness, but the freedom, the absolute, intoxicating freedom of flight, of mastering this difficult machine, of claiming a space in the sky that the world once insisted belonged only to men. She thinks of Nadezhda, 23 years old, standing in that Moscow recruiting office in 1941. She thinks of all the night witches, 32, who died, dozens more who survived but carried scars visible and invisible for the rest of their lives. She thinks of what they sacrificed, what they proved, what they left behind. Their legacy is not just historical. It lives in every woman who serves in uniform today, in every female pilot who straps into a cockpit, in every person who looks at a barrier and decides to break it rather than accept it. The night witches flew so that others could follow. They carried not just bombs, but possibility, the possibility of a world where courage and skill matter more than gender, where opportunity is determined by ability rather than tradition, where the sky is open to everyone. Katia banks the P-2 in a gentle turn, heading back toward the airfield. She imagines her great-grandmother in this same cockpit 75 years ago, returning from a mission over German lines. Exhausted, frightened, determined, victorious. The aircraft settles onto the grass with barely a bump. Katia shuts down the engine, and in the sudden silence, she hears the wind. Just the wind, not the whistle of bombs, not the roar of flak, not the screams of dying friends. Just whined through canvas, the sound that once meant terror to German soldiers and hope to Soviet defenders. She climbs out of the cockpit, her legs shaky from the adrenaline and emotion. A crowd has gathered to watch the demonstration flight. Aviation enthusiasts, historians, school children on a field trip. She speaks to them about the night witches, about her great-grandmother, about what these women accomplished with obsolete aircraft and unlimited courage. A young girl, perhaps 10 years old, raises her hand. "Can I be a pilot too?" she asks. Katia smiles. This is why the story matters. This is why the remembrance must continue. "Yes," she says, "you can be anything you want." The night witches prove that. The sun sets over the Black Sea, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The P-2 sits on the grass, canvas wings glowing in the last light of day. Tomorrow it will fly again, carrying new generations aloft, keeping the memory alive. The night witches are gone now. The last survivor, Irina Sabrova, died in 2000. But their legacy endures in canvas and steel, in stories and memories, in the courage they inspired and the barriers they shattered. They flew through darkness and emerged into light. They carried bombs and brought victory. They were ordinary women who accomplished extraordinary things, and they will never be forgotten. If you found this story inspiring, please subscribe to our channel for more untold stories of World War II heroism. Like this video and leave a comment telling us which aspect of the Night Witch's story impacted you most. In our next documentary, We'll explore Operation Compass, the forgotten desert victory that changed the course of the North African campaign. We'll also be covering The Great Escape, the real story that Hollywood never told you. Stay tuned, and remember, history belongs to those brave enough to make it.